It's my great pleasure here on Mumbling Planet to introduce the legendary string improviser, LaDonna Smith. Welcome to Mumbling Planet.
Hey, thank you. It's nice to be here, James.
It's great to have you here.
I'm on a green planet today, by the way.
You're on a green planet today?
Yeah, I'm on a green planet.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
It's green and blue.
As you see, you're wearing blue. I'm wearing green, and I'm looking out the window at entirely a green array of bushes, so.
Well, that's nice. I should have had that same idea. I have this big styrofoam board covering my view of my own window, so I can't see outside. I'm in a black box. So you can look at the green for me.
All the better for the back of your eyeballs. Well, down here in Alabama, we're not in the New York scene anymore than you are. So we do it our own way. We sort of meet in like grain towers and stuff, maybe out back, where they're pouring metal, stuff like that.
I'm so interested to hear about like how like the kind of stuff that you were doing in the 70s and 80s with Fresh Dirt and and like I have so many questions about like your. You know what? I here's what I did. As I was listening, so I spent half the day yesterday listening to your music, and just like writing stuff down and like thinking about what I was gonna. And so I just like go through and then maybe we spark conversations and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, sure.
Okay, sure. So I started off by listening to "Channeling the Gateway," which I thought was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that's the last piece I've done. That actually made it to a CD.
And you called it a piece. I'm interested in that. Your relationship with the word composer. Piece. Yeah, right. What's your relationship with the idea of the composer, as opposed to the improviser?
It's a relationship with a musician, is what it is, and the relationship with free improvisation. Study in school. I have my master's degree in theory and composition from the University of Alabama, and I was finishing that up when I met Davey Williams. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I was a child pianist, and I'm still a pianist at heart. That's my main and favorite instrument.
Oh, really?
Yes, it is. I got into like you. I got into orchestra strings and all that stuff late, like at 21. I started viola lessons. I had about 3 years of formal viola, and I was meeting Davey. And the good thing about that was, he said, "Well, let's play sometime." Well, actually, I'll tell you, we met. Anne LeBaron, who's quite a esteemed American woman composer. Actually, she's known around the world. Was a friend of ours, and she invited us to go to a local county fair, which had like cows and pigs and dung and stuff, and it was just really a localized like thing, just and it was kind of I think it was a Zamora thing, and it was just out in the outskirts of Tuscaloosa, and so I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll go with you." Well, she picked me up in her big, I don't know, it was some kind of like tail-finned Pontiac or something like this, just really an old, dilapidated car, which I still have a from, which Davey liked to go out and shoot holes in it, so it's got a lot of split holes in it. But she picked us up in that gold car, and sure enough, there was about 6 people already in it. So I had to sit in the lap of somebody I didn't even know. And we went out there, we're stuffed in this car, and then we had to stand in line and get tickets. And it just seemed like a ridiculous situation. But
it's like a county fair.
Uh-huh. So anyway, there was a Ferris wheel. So she paired me and Davey up to ride on the Ferris wheel together. So we wound up riding on this Ferris wheel. He was the weirdest, strange looking guy I ever saw. And so all of a sudden we were at the top of the Ferris wheel and it stopped. And we were stuck up there on the very tip top of the Ferris wheel, and we had to talk to each other. And so in doing that, he found out that I was in composition and he was in a blues band and a soul band. And he said, well, I want to write scores. Can you help me write scores? And I said, well, yeah, sure. And so we had a meeting. We came down off the Ferris wheel. That's how we met, was on a Ferris wheel, which is an interesting object to meet somebody who changes your life.
Yeah, that's quite the romantic image, you know.
Yeah, so we started getting together. He said, come down to my apartment. Turns out he lived about a half a block away down in, some kind of like upstairs apartment, student style, kind of like dilapidated old building. I went up the stairs and I walked in, and this racket was playing like I had never heard before. And it turned out to be Peter Brooksman's Machine Gun. And so I just took it in stride, and that's what Davey played every time I visited. That would be going on, would be Machine Gun. So anyway, we were looking at graphic scores. And sure. He had already written some of them and had some ideas, for these various things. So that's our relationship. And I was going to help him with composition, but it turned out, he said, let's play. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? What do you mean? He says, oh no, let's just play. And I said, well, where? He says, well, somewhere on the university where you get in a room. So I said, oh yeah, I can get in a room. So we got in a room, and I took the viola, and there was a piano, it was the jazz ensemble room, and he brought his electric guitar, and we played, and it just worked. And I was like, really amazed and open that, well, you don't have to write stuff down. This is working. And from that, it was just like, a sudden realization. It's like, you don't need a head. You don't need to write down any ideas. You can just play with someone. And we just had a compatibility that was like none other. So, that started our entire relationship. And we got to where we were playing like 2, 3, 4 times a week, meeting in the jazz ensemble room. And then later, he introduced me to the Redellinist group, which had already been, it was a community group. Several of the people in it had gone to Tuscaloosa High School. They were high school buddies and stuff. And they were just blowing free, like jam free for an hour, just blowing your brains out kind of people. Sort of like the Machine Gun record, I think they had found and discovered that. And so that was sort of the modus operandus, of that group. What Davey and I were doing was a bit more compositional, and in the way that it presented itself, even though it wasn't composition.
Would you? So, it's funny you talk about composition, but I guess when you're playing with somebody else and you just develop that relationship, like maybe memory has something to do with it. Maybe if you develop a language and you remember things about the language, and then you start having conversations about the same thing, and you kind of walk back through, the things that maybe that's partially compositional.
That's the pitfall, that's the pitfall of it all. And Davey would tell you that too. You try not to remember. You try not to remember. You try not to play your favorite riffs. You try not to
cliches,
emulate.
Right?
somebody else's style, or some other thing. So what you do
it's
is
not novelty for the sake of novelty, though, right? Like, because that's a problem too.
It has nothing to do with novelty. It has to do with streaming and like not thinking, like absolutely not thinking, and not necessarily. Now, I'm not saying that's what I do now, but in the beginning, that was the whole construct, which is to not try to dip into known things.
I guess that's the tie to surrealism, right? Is the automaticity thing?
Yeah, it had to do with that, totally. And it's just like starting but the thing is, your brain is going to organize. Right. And so when you're hearing a sound, it's like the first sound is first note. To me, I wanted a clear beginning. I wanted action happening, some climax. I wanted, because let's get back to where memory exists. Because of the standards of good composition, because that's what I was studying. And Davey kind of wanted that too, like a good book. You don't want to just ramble.
Right.
And so that was what we were trying to point out when we started out Trans, was to not ramble, not to have a so-called jam session, that went on for hours, that had no structure. And, we wanted to create a music that actually existed like a gem or a piece of art or something that had structure, but it was automatically done through a kind of a conscious or unconscious way.
I guess that's the question. Like, how does structure emerge without any forethought?
Yeah, it's to develop subconscious ability to, manifest.
What is the experience of that
was
feel
good,
Like, how does it feel when it's arising? Like,
well, you can just tell when you're clicking. We can tell.
Does it feel like it's outside or inside?
It's inside.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times you don't even know when you get through with it. It's like psychic automatism.
Right. So I was going to say, because there's another person too, right? So, like, because to a certain extent, you're allowing the outside too. So I guess it's hard to tell between outside or inside, because the thing just sort of emerges between the participants or whatever.
Right. Well, you're absorbing the sound of the other person, and that's a very important part of really good free improvisation, is to absorb what's going on around you and not just be doing your own willy-nilly,
Right.
So as you absorb what you're hearing, then your response to it is automatic, and your response to is somewhat I would say well, I can't think of a word for it, but yeah, it has to do with your own aesthetic in a way. Your response to it's going to be aesthetically managed, just by your own,
right?
Who you are and your prejudice, and
that brings me to another question. Another thing that I was going to ask you, which this brings us to, I think, is how do you practice? Like, if your main outlet is improvisation, and the idea is to not reuse cliches. Practice by its nature well, at least certain kinds of practice, maybe not your kind of practice, I don't know, but practice often involves repetition, of technical things that you have to master. And, I mean, and listening through your recordings, you're clearly have a technical mastery, of your instrument.
I definitely have worked to master my instrument to the extent that I can. I'm not going to go and play the Mendelssohn Concerto. I don't have time for it, and sure. I don't have an interest in it, and it's a way too intense in terms of there's different definitions of practice. And for me, it's not about practicing technical skill in improvisation per se. You practice that outside of improvisation, so you master your instrument. But I'm not going to go to the level of learning or memorizing a Mendelssohn Concerto. I mean, screw it. That's just way too much use of my time that I cannot possibly do it in my lifetime. But the practice of practice is it's more like yoga. I mean, you practice, that's what you do. It's like fishing. If somebody is really, really good at it, they go out and they fish a lot. I have a friend that catches huge catfish and all kinds of stripers and stuff. And that's his practice. It is fishing. And so in a way, fishing is a very broad term now. It's used in the computer world. And it's used in, just regular old, fishing in the waters, for catch. And that's kind of what we do in free improvisation. When you extend a note or a sound and someone else extends another one, then you are fishing for some kind of connection.
I was going to say that I noticed one of the things that I notice you do sometimes is you'll do a pretty wide kind of vibrato sometimes that kind of like explores around, and so part of me feels like you're waiting for something to latch on. It works as vibrato, but like there's like a probability that like it allows for something unexpected to happen tonally, that you can latch onto and then go from there. I mean, I don't know if that's on purpose.
I don't know if it's on purpose either. It just may
But you explore that in between space, in between notes so well. I mean, like I would, channeling the spirit, but on some of these other ones too, I noticed that, I can tell that your ears don't spend all their time in equal temperament.
No. In fact, I really enjoy Indian music. Is one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I could hear it all over the place. I could tell that you had definitely listened to Indian music.
Yeah, there's so much nuance, and I like that
really.
A lot. Yeah,
absolutely. Which brings me back to practice. I mean, I guess it's like this idea that so it's not like you spend your time necessarily like, well, this is a question, like practicing within a certain tradition. It's mostly like a sort of an inner exploration, like a contemplative yogic practice where you're sort of exploring your own intuitions about sound.
Yeah, would be session. That would not be practice. That would be session. Okay. When you have a session with somebody, like practice, I do practice. And like you, I'm a music educator, so I have taught a lot of violin, and I teach violin techniques and as I understand them, and in many different styles. So I have adult students and children students at the moment in both piano and violin, and I have one adult that's from Louisiana, and we do Cajun styles with her, and another one from Ukraine, and we've been working on lots of, we started out on classical music. She's very advanced, and mature musically, and so but then now we've been doing Eastern European music, so there's all kinds of styles. And then I had Indian students, and so I had at least 8 or 9 year run, like doing some Indian stuff. Some of my students have done Mexican. I mean, all of them have actually, because I like to just really chew up any kind of music I haven't heard before, and that's what I like to listen to. I don't want to listen to something that I already know. I want to listen to stuff I hadn't heard before. So I developed technique by playing all kinds of styles in music, but when it comes to doing improvisation and creating my own music, then I want my mind to be off of that and into session, which is getting in the zone.
I got you.
You know, getting in the mind frame of the zone of listening and responding, you know, in a kind of free and improvised way. Is something you do. It's like fishing, you know, or a yoga practice. It's something that makes you healthy. You know, the practice of eating healthy is one thing. You know, it's more like that kind of practice rather than practicing to achieve, you know, a work, you know, that someone has written or something like that, you know, or achieve mastery on your instrument, you know, where you're doing rudiments and that kind of practice, you know. Maybe they're related, right, you know, on some level. Of course they are. But to get in the zone, to get in the head frame, and also as a listener, you have to have educated listeners to really appreciate the kind of music that we do.
That's true. That's fair.
Because there are a lot of people who just really don't get it, and because they haven't practiced it, they don't understand it. You know.
Yeah, I guess it's the idea of a virtuoso listener. You know.
Oh yeah.
Saying
well, you know these jazz cats, they're virtuoso listeners all over the place. You know about jazz. Mm-hmm. And Leland, who I played with, you know, the drummer of the recording engine. He knows all the jazz cats and all their work and all this kind of stuff, and I don't, you know.
Sure.
I just don't, you know. And so it's nice. It's really great to play with somebody who has a different background.
Yeah.
Because we all have our prejudicial backgrounds, you know, of how we're trained.
Yeah.
You know. You put it together.
Yeah, I think
somehow.
that is one of the interesting things about improvised music, I think, as a phenomenon, is that it brings together people of different musical traditions, you know.
Yeah. I said I love how the old-time fiddle shows up in the most unexpected contexts. Oh yeah. Well, I've had a number of students who were like fiddle masters. Actually, one of them was recorded on a Smithsonian record. I learned more from her, I think. Well, actually, I taught her violin, but I learned a lot more about fiddle from her and her uncle. And he used to be like a three-fingered violinist. Well, I said fiddler, I should say. He was three-fingered fiddler who worked for the Grand Ole Opry, you know, and judged all these fiddle contests. And my student Sabrina, she was hot, and she was just a young thing, you know. She'd go win those contests, you know. It was great, and yeah, we had a whole a lot of fiddle music, you know, in the context of learning to play the violin. It's a lot of fun. I love delving into other styles. Lots of diversity. So it'll slink in, you know. That's part of your language, you know. Once you learn a language, then, you know, that sort of stuff does slink in, you know, kind of like collage elements, you know, in the music sense.
Sure, and just like the juxtaposition, you know, you kind of notice there are connections there that you might not have realized before once you like kind of, tap dancing in between them.
That's
you know
true.
What I mean?
That's true.
That little bend that this bluegrass thing did is not so different from this little bend they do in raga.
Exactly.
Or whatever, you know. I tell my friend that blues is microtonal music, you know.
It can be.
People don't realize it, you know.
Especially if you play it on an out-of-tune guitar. And by the way, I love out-of-tune instruments, and I do play a lot of music on out-of-tune instruments. I deliberately tune them out. You know?
Was that? Yeah. That solo. It was that other. What was the name of that record?
Rising Tulips.
One of the other ones on.
Yeah.
Rising Tulips. Oh yeah. Because I know that some of like the initial notes of some of those drones and loops, you know, was you call it out of tune if you want. A different tuning is
yeah.
another way to think about it, because
alternative
you start
tunings. Yeah,
exactly right. And then you start to really draw out like what the interest of those ratios are, and little things that are in between there. It's the kind of thing that as someone who's been into microtonal music a bit, I find just like really great. You listen to some Harry Parch and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, she's playing Parch style, harmonies here. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that as well. And especially with string instruments, it's so easily done. You say, okay, I need a new idea. The best thing to do is just detune the string and go on. It's easy. It's a really easy way to just totally change the entire dynamic. Is to detune the string, because then you have to deal with it. What it is, it's like I was recently somewhere and somebody was begging me, oh, you got to play the violin for so and so. You got to do it. You got to do it. So they had this really low quality instrument to start with, and they didn't even have a string on it. One of the strings was gone, and so I said, well, that's no problem. I just kind of tuned it up, I should say tuned it down to just some kind of like weird, ridiculous something that actually had nothing to do with standard tuning, and played an improv, and it's totally doable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the harmonics that come out of detuned strings are just entirely different from the ones that come out in standard pitch. And the colors are different. It gives you a whole new palette.
I was gonna say, it's kind of like the in some of these surrealist games, where you're put into a situation where the normal ways of communicating are intentionally subverted, and you have to kind of work with what's there.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, Davey was one of the first in the United States to use object guitar, as a type of theater of guitar, and he became really well known for his object guitar, and actually wrote some thesis on it, about a methodology, his Mockingbird
Tell me
methods.
Object guitar. What is that? Object guitar? I haven't heard of that.
Oh, well, he used a number of objects, like he had a stuffed,
like prepared guitar,
stuffed mouse, and he had toothbrush and all that, and
right,
just a cream whipper, and he had wind up dinosaurs, and he had a battleship, like a model battleship, and he would play with stuff like that, and actually that would be the way he would create so many of his marvelous sounds, one of a kind sounds, one of a kind look. He had this tape measure that he would whip out, in a concert and just flail it around, and and that was awesome. He had this huge long metal angle iron that he used on the guitar. He would use 2 or 3 guitars together, and way back in the 70s, and so his devotion to surrealism, was extreme, and he really theorized quite a bit in music in surrealism. He was a very articulate writer, and at the same time a very dynamic performer, using the ideas of the object itself, is a stimulant, for his strings, and to create the music that he did, on it. And it's pretty outstanding. And so, since then, a lot of people are using objects, and that's become a thing, actually, but
yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's happened quite a bit. A lot of people do use objects now, and I, as the straight person in the duo, I kind of experimented a little with objects at first, but then I decided, nah, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to use the bow, and the bow is going to be it. And I'm going to create just the strangest sounds that I can possibly invent or discover. Just using the bow is kind of
there's a lot you can do with the bow.
A point, yeah, of course there is, and I found that there was nothing that an object would do that I couldn't do with a bow, because the bow, is married to the instrument to start with, and so that was kind of our black and white balance. Davey studied profusely, I should say, surrealism, and much more than I did. And I became a part of it kind of as a result of his study and his knowledge, and then his commitment, to create in a surrealistic manner as opposed to Dadaistic, which that was more like the Rebellious group, like creating, anarchistic, racket and noise and, in your face kind of stuff. The surrealist approach would be a more poignant, more focused in a way. And as far as I understand the history of the rift with music in early surrealism and Breton and stuff, they're just some of the composers were somewhat accepted, I would think. Like
Satie,
Pierre Henry, in the early electronic music. I'm not sure exactly what they're. To me, I would think that would have lent itself to surrealist acceptance, but I'm not sure that deserves study. But yeah, they like Satie. Satie kind of hung out with him in the bars, in the coffee bars, and was around. These surrealists create friendship circles, and then you get on a mode. The Glass Veal group is our early group. Fresh Dirt is our later group. Our earlier group, Glass Veal, we would meet. It would be like a practice to meet, at least once, twice, 3 times a week. And create together, create drawings, create writing works, create arguments and discussions and all that kind of stuff. And so that's sort of in the mode of what we think, or what I think that the cafe, meetings were about, among the realists, the early surrealist poets and the writers and the theorists, because we had Mitchell Cashin and Davey Williams, and they were both incredibly deep theorists, and they would argue about things, and at the same time, Mitchell was a painter, and Davey was a writer and a musician, who was trying to create a theory of surrealism in music, because of that past history. Now, to me, Satie doesn't sound surrealist to me. I love Satie. I just as soon play Debussy or Satie or, and any number of other composers.
Maybe something like Vexations or something.
Yeah,
maybe,
I like the fact that he dismissed the bar lines, and and then also just had kind of impressionistic directions, in some of the music, kind of like, okay, go ahead and just. In a way, it was a little bit like a forerunner of free improvisation in a sense, like a little lighter, a little, these kind of like very conscious kind of directions, not really, So you could kind of get away with playing Satie any tempo, you could speed up or you could slow down, it wasn't.
You said that Davey Williams
rich.
Theorized a lot on surrealism in music. Is there a place where we could find some of those writings?
Yeah, we published the Improviser for 30 years.
In the Improviser.
And he's got several like manifestos on, music and surrealism that have been published in this, and also the Surrealist group, Sweden has published some of his work, and then also he's had work published in Paris on the Discourse magazine, and so yeah, it's out there, and I should send it to you. I'm just kind of like looking through here so I can find something. But
awesome, a lot of stuff to read.
It is good stuff. I mean, it's really, really, really good stuff. And then this magazine, we were asking for articles, about improvisation. So we get articles like Sounding Off and Within Reach, and reviews of new music, and particularly the improvised type. So it's here's one. Sound is round, and so is music. And so somebody is like Doug Carroll here. Some notes on sonosphericity and improvisation. And so he's talking about sound waves and the paradox of being focused and detached at the same time.
Oh yeah, there's the good stuff.
And detachment results in a meditative state while focus is on the sound. There's lots of theory in improviser.
Oh yeah, I got to read that.
Yeah, and this is the issue number 11 from 1996. Yeah, the possibilities inside resides in the realm of yin. Yeah, I'm just like picking out, statements here. Great. It says this frees the mind to act directly on the sound perception without going through undue cognitive processing.
It feels like simultaneously that it's like completely out of control, but it's also like extremely articulate and frenzied. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it feels like
it's a good question. How does it feel? Because
you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of different feelings that go on. You get a sense of feeling when you're playing. Sometimes you realize you're really onto an area. There's an area of sound. It could be like uncontrolled harmonics that you have hit upon, and you would not necessarily be able to come back to that exactly by will. You might hit upon it again by chance, but you're not going to come back to that by will. So those are moments of flying where you got to trust the wings and the air draft, and you just continue it until you feel like it has been exhausted. And then you move.
That's beautiful.
You have to leave it, at that point. Now, there are other moments and that feels wonderful. That feels like the true essence, of mastery of flying. But there are times when you feel like, when I feel like anyway, oh, holy shit, this is horrible. That guitarist just doesn't understand the amplitude level of the viola that he's working with, and I am being like, like completely decimated and covered over and beat to hell and back, just to try to keep up. And so, you feel like you have to use some kind of, other type of technique, to maintain your presence while you're being literally your sound is being literally destroyed and you're being beaten up by the music. And so it's not pleasant at all. And so definitely you don't feel very good about that. But it gives you a kind of a determination, to find a way. Oh, this is Davey's brother. Oh, hang on a second. Hey, Johnny, you're on a podcast. You're on a podcast with James Foster here. We're talking about free improvisation, some of Davey's theories. Anyway, we just started a Zoom meeting. Can I be back in just a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Unless you got some kind of...
just call me when you can.
Yeah, well, have you got anything like dynamic, or earth-breaking to say about the music that happens down...
I'm going to have something to say about Davey.
Okay.
But musically, I think I'll let you guys handle that.
All righty. All right. What you gonna say about Davey? I think he bailed. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, radio out. All right. Yeah, he's the one with the grain silos. How does it feel?
So I guess you're talking about communicating.
I like the
vessels.
Bob Dylan thing. How does it feel? You know, when you're on your own and you know, no direction, moan. You know, all that. Yeah, there's feeling is something, you know, and we put a lot of it into music, you know. So maybe I'll just flail around, you know, and dance, you know, or do something like that, you know, because what else can you do? You do it until things calm down, and then you find your space, and that's when you jump in, you know. So it can be somewhat strategic to play.
Yeah, it's almost like there's that almost political dimension.
Oh God, I felt so sorry for you, you know, when at the underground, those guys from Birmingham, they just were I don't know what got into them. They were so sensitive in our recording session, and then all of a sudden, I think it was Jasper that started this one riff and just wouldn't let go of it. It was just wham, wham, wham. You know, it just kept going and going.
Oh, you're talking about when it got loud?
Yeah, it was loud.
Yeah.
And then that made Joel play. You know,
I kept trying to escape it too.
Not the way he
Like,
played.
I was like, I have to keep meeting it. You know what I mean? Because it's there. That's what's going on. You know, you have to.
You
like,
went
meet the
to
moment.
war. You absolutely went to war. You were like all over the damned place. You were all over it. It's just like, it's just like, oh my God, you know, he's fighting for his life.
Do you think it was too much? Because I
I was
felt
glad
bad
to be
about it
sitting in front
afterward,
of you
actually.
and not in front of them. I was totally entertained by it, but at the same time, I could feel your pain, and so there is that. There's a painful aspect to, you know. No, that whole set was an electronic nightmare. It really was. I mean, if you wanted to do underground, you know, and subliminal, you know, nightmares, that was it. But yeah.
But some of the other moments were beautiful and nuanced, I think, in that recording session.
There was some
good
nuance,
moments.
definitely. I'm not going to take away from that. But yeah, there was quite a long swath of, you know, out of controlness, you know, and just repetitious. What would you say? Sabotage. Sorry. But
No,
you were
it's
the
okay.
victim. You weren't the perpetrator. You were the victim of it. But at the same time,
thank
you
you.
were like swimming, like somebody threw you out in the ocean and you were having to swim for your life. And, you know, that was part of the drama.
Yeah, but as soon as the waters calmed down and the sky opened up, you were right there flying like a bird in the sky.
God, yeah, and there was just Marie, you know, just scratching away as if nothing else was happening, you know. It was great. It was appropriate, you know, for the moment.
It is.
But,
It is interesting though how like it's a matter of like there are these like these almost political, almost ethical questions that are explored during
or
improvisation.
exploited. Oh yeah, you held up.
Right?
You held up. That would have drove me crazy. I mean, you know, I wouldn't choose to be in that environment. And I'm glad I chose not to play in that group because there was already so much going on, you know.
Yeah.
It was just really intense. I don't believe I could have held up, even on an electronic instrument, which I did have several there, which really didn't get explored in that particular gig. But they would have been just swamped out of out of perspective. And even when I was working with Lift and Damani, I was feeling that too. There's got to be, to me, I mean, I'm very picky about free improvisation. I want to balance. I want articulation and, movement from one zone to the next, I'm too old for it. I don't want to be obliterated. What's the word? Into oblivion. Maybe that's part of it. By the practice. It's like if I want to paint, I want to get something that pleases me and is beautiful and has its own textures, and there's so much to look at, but everything is precise and wonderful. I don't want to just be throwing I have a bucket of paint thrown at me and suddenly I'm all one color. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to paint on me, paint me with a brush. I'm sorry. I'm ranting now. I am in a rant.
No, it's okay. I've run into that same problem. As a bass player, because the bass, the double bass as an instrument is really quiet naturally, And playing with jazz people or trying to play with jazz people over the years, without an amplifier, like I always find like tear up my finger trying to get as loud as the. So I'm like, one of the reasons I finally got an amp is because I got tired of competing with the saxophone player.
Yeah, we should, and I don't feel like we should have to compete. I mean, I just expect my musical partners to be better than that. It's sometimes
Sure.
I feel like I'm fighting a nuclear war with a slingshot. When that happens, I would just as soon just get off stage and let that nuclear thing go on, and wait until the calm comes back, because I don't know, it's just like it's like a deer, and it's suddenly you're a deer in headlight. You just want to get off the road, come back, to the green grass when all the traffic is past, I hope that's not a sign of weakness, but I think it's
I don't
a
think so
sign
at
of
all. No,
discretion. You don't do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't see a point
Right.
in continuing to make noise and sound when there's already a sound palette that's so full of it that what you're doing is not helping or is not contributing, but just making it muddier. So to me, I like noise this complex, but I don't want to just contribute to a muddy sound. I think the audience deserves more.
What's it? Listening being the first step to.
Well,
like
we
good
get right
improvisation.
back to what's really important in this music, and in making it work. Because there are a lot of skeptics out there on free improvisation. So I don't want to prove to them that it's really a bunch of amateur hacks. I want to prove to them that you can make music through free improvisation that's just as articulate and beautiful and as and reasonable and sensible as composed music. That it can come from the subconscious in the moment and be just as good. And also the other part of that is to play your own music and not somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that aspect of it. And so if I'm going to play my own music for someone and not somebody else's, then, I'm not going to try for memorized passage work. I'm not going to muddy up somebody else's sound, just by trying to get in there, and I might fight for, survival, like you had to do. I would do that, to a point, but after a point, you go, okay, now what?
I think maybe some of it is in some of these musical worlds, the sort of default ambient volume is louder. Maybe like in some of these noise music kinds of spaces.
That's kind of what was going on there.
Or rock spaces.
Well, yeah, and sometimes the language is just screaming.
Sure. Of course, I kind of like some of that kind of music too. I mean, intense, noisy stuff maybe has a place too.
Yeah, it definitely has a place, and it speaks loudly. There's all forms of protest, and music is a major form of protest, and some of that noise music, is an example of that. Form of protest. And so just expression, just the raw expression, I guess, a lot of these guitar bands, they're just whacking away,
Yeah, and it's interesting because this brings us back to the dialectic, I think, that we were getting at before, too, to a certain extent, this idea of composer versus a musician, or like someone who's highly trained and a professional, versus an amateur. But I know, like, even reading some of your writings that you've written about improvisation, you said like one of the good things about free improvisation is that someone who's sensitive enough, who doesn't have that much training, can jump in and contribute.
That's right. That's true.
Or whatever. I mean, there's something there too. But so, like, I guess the question is like, the idea of a musician, or the idea of a composer, or the idea of a generalist versus a specialist, broadly speaking, sort of like in our current cultural landscape. Like the problematics of specialization. In various ways. The idea of surrealism, saying art is for everyone, kind of thing. Like these present interesting sort of dialectical spaces, I think, that bear exploring, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's all in the spirit of collaboration, and not in the spirit of, megalomaniac, narcissistic, annihilation, and all that. It's the spirit of collaboration, creating together, where you're inclusive of your
there you
partner.
go. See, and you said that a minute ago. The idea that surrealism, like at the quarter, you could, I was talking with Steven the other day about this, and I was saying, I don't know that much about surrealism, blah, blah, blah. And he was saying, well, maybe it's even better that you haven't, like gone too deep into that. And like your main experience is through like living surrealism, which to a large extent is relationships.
Exactly. We're back to that.
And like engaging in the act of collaboration, because surrealism, like at its heart, is a collaborative enterprise, right?
That's a form of it. Maybe that's one form of it. In terms of community, engaging in collaboration, whether it's poetry or art or music, it's one way that we designate ourselves as a community, in a sense, because we have similar openness to collaboration. But then there's the risk too of aesthetic diversity. What person's aesthetic model is maybe not another person's. So can we cooperate in a way where we can incorporate aesthetic diversities? And that's a big question.
Right. And then we get back to the recording session and these war games, right?
War thing. Yeah. Aesthetic diversity intense. Some people are doing, like computer art. Others are doing cut and paste, and can we work in collaboration, and not necessarily in that, but we can definitely look over the boundaries of our own limitations,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is, I cannot turn the viola up loud enough to manage, what an electric guitar can do. That's impossible. And it's not, I can't turn it up as an acoustic instrument. And even as if I put it through an electronics, it would just feedback and just act ugly, so there's a limitation. So I want to play with people who understand amplitude, and that's a technical deference. That's just technical.
Yeah. Right. See, I get on a back and forth with these things too, because it's like at a certain point, like on the one hand, diving really deep into like some things aren't possible to accomplish without a deep technical knowledge.
True.
Right. I mean,
that's very true. Yeah. Mastery.
Right, but then there's that. But see, here's the problem. Maybe this is me getting into like bigger philosophical issues that you may or may not want to like sink your teeth into. But like, I mean, they have that old saying like the last person to know everything was Leibniz. Like the idea of a polymath or the idea of a generalist. And part of surrealism is this idea of thinking across domains. Or not getting stuck in one paradigm or one way of conceiving of knowledge or creativity or these kinds of things. But what the problem is like the body of knowledge, the body of technical information has become so vast that it's like at a certain point, if you want to engage with a domain of like human activity in a meaningful way, you have to spend much more of your life learning the techniques of that thing than other things, which has opportunity costs for where you could be spending your time elsewhere, which means you become a specialist, But the problem is we get siloed in these domains of specialization, that leave us cut off from understanding these other things. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm going off on a rabbit trail, but it feels like we're supposed to like contextualize things more broadly. Like we're supposed to be the ones presenting like we're the myth makers, right? We're the storytellers. We're the dreamers of dreams, and there's a responsibility there. I feel like to have some grip on the big picture, right?
But as dreamers of dreams, it gives us permission, to blow off a lot of stuff. Like, yeah, if you're in a session and you're not liking it, you don't have to play. You don't have to play. And
see, maybe this is the megalomaniac composer's thing coming out of me, because like I'm thinking of all these big like historical metaphysical questions that are supposed to be represented, and you're like, oh, if you're in your session, you can play if you want or don't if you want. Like that's much more concrete. Maybe that's a better way of thinking of things.
Or you may decide you want to play in clay. You play in clay. You don't want to play in cyber techniques. And people still play and play, and I do, as a matter of fact. That's one of my mediums of choice. Because it's so grounding. I mean, that's probably a bad pun, but it is grounding. You
got some pictures of your sculptures up on Instagram?
No, I have them on my the Fresh Dirt website. There's some. You have to click on them because the photos are in landscape and the pieces are in, portrait. So if you look at the ones that are up there on fresh-dirt.org.us, .us, then you can see the sculptures. Yeah, they're interesting. They're very like vegetation, animated vegetation or something like that. A lot of them are. I really enjoy making them, and they kind of make themselves. That's another one of those subconscious or stream of consciousness activities. Unlike music, it's just a different medium, but it works like that. It just, I think in collage, people just seeing stuff, it's there, they cut it out, start organizing it, subconscious kind of brings it together. And then people like Stephen and Hazel, they have such an eye for collage. Both of them are really, really amazing at it. Janice Hathaway is another person that she's my Fresh Dirt partner, and I just think her work is amazing. She shoots all of her own photographs, and then works on it digitally, and creates her prints, and they're just masterful and amazing. And I don't work in that medium. I work in clay and maybe drawing, something more simple. But surrealism can be an expression for any medium. Just the concept of either collaboration or taking objects or disjunct concepts and ideas and weaving them together, to create a new tapestry, of reality.
Is that why you would say you do what you do?
I don't know why I do what I do, but I am.
Me either.
I think I've been down that, like you said, the rabbit hole long enough that I can't really escape it anymore. It's kind of a home to me. Yeah. I would rather be chasing that rabbit hole than engaging in. I'm not a game person. I know that surrealist games are great. But I think I'm just not smart enough to be one of the gamers. But I have to appreciate it. Realities, the altered realities can take many forms.
Some of those games are not that different from like text scores.
Yeah. Not living in Atlanta and participating in y'all's games, I don't know. We had a game that we did. Well, we went through a period of doing some games. We had an automatic writing machine, and it was this round thing, kind of like a dial twist, and it had holes in it. We would cut up words and stick them up under there, and in random forms, like just cut up books and newspapers, cut up these phrases and words and stuff, mostly just words, and shuffle them underneath the dial that had the little holes in it. So we'd spin the dial and we'd see what the word was, and then we'd write it down, and we'd get another one, we'd write it down, and we'd see what the universe was trying to tell us, through that particular game. But see, that didn't take any intelligence. You just do it, and I like games like that. That's kind of like, right, playing a ball game or something, in a sense. You don't have to think. Well, now they've got strategic ball games, but I always thought football was just button heads, but I understand it's quite strategic. Another game we did in one of our publications, because as surrealists, we like to do publications because these are ways that we can show our expressive work. One of them was parallel texts, and so we made a list of words that had to be used in all 5 of our group participants, 5 or 6 of us at that time. Yeah. We had to write an essay using those words, those exact words. And like one of them was tinfoil, for instance. So if we wrote an essay, you had to use the word tinfoil or platypus or something, like that, some kind of word. And so, like, for instance, in a parallel text that we had tinfoil slinks into sparks, whistling into the clouds' ribs that have barbecued by the sun's smiling teeth. So that one was Dora's entry. That was her first line. And then another one came out. Here's one by Glenn Engstrand. The tinfoil that whistles through ribs will work in a pleasant feeling that reflects the mood of sport. So, that goes on. Then there's another one that doesn't start with tinfoil, but tinfoil will be in somewhere in the text, of it. So all of the appetites, various tongues, jaws, various iris. Iris was one of the words, and so these parallel writings. So it's interesting because it
the
gives us a launch pad, say, okay, we've got to do this, okay, I wasn't planning on writing anything today, but okay, here we are in the game. We have to write a paragraph, or actually an essay. And we're sitting there all together writing our essay, using these words up. And was very interesting then to come around and then read them to each other, and then ultimately publish
Absolutely.
them, in one of our self-done books. We don't send nothing to Lulu. We just do it, or did do it when we had a group. We don't really have a group now. We sort of have a group, but we don't really have a group. Not like when we had Glassville.
Oh no, you still doing Transmusiq?
Well, the problem with Transmusiq is that's a project-oriented thing, at this point, because Davey's passed away, in 2020. And so different partners kind of appear and show up. And the last couple of things that I put out on Transmusiq was a couple of other people's work, that were doing memorials to Davey, and that he had inspired them. So I don't know what the next one will be, but it'll come back up when the time comes. It began as a collaboration of compatible, improvisation, improvisation that kind of holds the Transmusiq standard. So we'll see.
Sure. Hey, I was just thinking, we were just talking a second ago about those games, and I was just thinking of the Ottawa Surrealist group did in one of their publications, they put out a game that they did called Anaerobic Poetry, where they had to, each person had one breath, and they had to do a whole poem in just one breath.
Wow, what a great idea.
And one of them was one of the most beautiful sentences I think I've ever heard in my life. And it goes like this. I memorized it. It's, a timepiece of perpendicular pendulums replaces my candid sleeping dreams with lies of love for you. Isn't that great. Gorgeous?
Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful.
That's like when we had Tom Faulkner in our group. He's also dead. I'd say most of our Glassville members are passed away. Mitchell Russian's passed away, Tom Faulkner, Davey Williams. So this is leaving Johnny Williams, who called on the phone a while ago, and Janice Hathaway and myself, and Davey's wife, second wife. I was the first wife. The second wife, Nico Linda, and she's also a very, very astute writer and artist and healer kind of person. So, you have your communities. And so now I feel like in a way more of a solo artist in a sense, but what we're trying to do with Fresh Dirt is dig up some new stuff. New stuff will present itself. They keep a tradition, Glassville and Transmusiq, any other form that we take, to enjoy and magnify life, life in all of its forms.
Absolutely.
So that's new collaborators. So I guess you and I have to play some point to see if we can weave some threads.
I had half a mind to just to come over to Alabama instead of doing this on Zoom today. Maybe next time.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to get you on our X-Prov series. Where you can, yeah.
X-Prov.
Taylor Rose is a new person that I'm collaborating with now, and he's awesome. I just love the way he thinks. He's very educated on free improvisation and some of the founders and masters of free improvisation around the world in the United States. And then he's also mined the fields of the southeastern free improvisation. So he's brought to the East Village Arts of Birmingham a series called X-Prov. And so, yeah, you should definitely be on that and come and play.
Yeah, I need to listen to more.
Oh, I need to listen. I don't have time to listen to stuff. I just really don't. And I teach a lot of music and I do play a lot of music. And so when I have my free time, I just would like to hear complete silence most of the time. And I'm not real big on listening to stuff. So Davey and I had a collection, must have 1,500, albums, and between his and mine and my great aunts and various people who
Lord.
passed on records here. Just ridiculous LPs, lots of LPs. And then we had the Improviser for 30 years, so people would send us cassettes and CD review, and we would be going on tour, in our jalopy, like driving to Chicago or something, and we'd have it like playing in the car, and one of us would be driving, one of us would be listening and writing, these reviews and stuff that people were playing. So I'm listened out, and on some days.
Well, there's just so much music. Like it's hard. Sometimes it feels like an ocean, It's just there's so much music out there.
It's gotten to the point there is so much music, and we're aware of it because of our ability to capture data now and to spread it everywhere. So life is still, very finite and short. What the interesting part is we are a drop in the bucket. We're a drop in the ocean. We will never know what else is there. We just see our little reality. We might as well be an ant crawling on the ground, because everything has an infinite flow, and we just a little bit of it, just a little grain of sand of it, really, so it's nothing's that important, I mean, we magnify things to importance, but nothing is that important. So I don't know.
That's a hard truth to wrap one's heart around.
It's very freeing, because then you go, okay, I've got all this crap in my house that's supposed to be for an archive, but who gives a damn, and it really, it's not going to make a difference, so it's freeing. It's like, okay, you have permission to actually be lazy. You have permission to just let it all go. And then I think that may be a lesson of life in the very end, when you're facing your death, you got to let it go. So that's something to actually consider and enjoy that aspect of it in your actual living, breathing life. But are we willing to do that? No, we're not willing to do that. We think we have to do all this work,
Why not? Why can't we do that? Why do we feel compelled to I think maybe it's this like this need to feel like you're going to live forever or something, some like compulsion to attach to the eternal or something.
Oh, goodness gracious. You have to be careful, or, so not to become, some kind of religious, slave, in terms of eternity.
Sure.
And, what's what. We don't know what's what. We absolutely, we don't even know. Well, we have all these objects and things that we're in a playpen. We're in a total playpen. So we might as well play. And that's what I think what surrealists really bring to, modern 20th century, 21st century life. It's okay. If we're in a playpen, let's play. Let's just play. I mean, we may have to work. We might have things, some people have kids, they have to deal with. I have dogs, but that's play. That's play. It's playful life, and seeing things in alternate realities and being creative, in terms of, you're not necessarily in conformity, with the mainstream. It's a wonderful way to play one's life.
Well, thank you very much. I think that seems like a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, especially I'm being deemed over here for repeatedly.
So let me just end by thanking you again for coming on the show. We haven't ever done an interview before, so this will be a first.
All right. Well, there's a first for everything, whether we solo or whether we fly together. We shall continue it, I hope, in the future. Thank you for having me.